what's an insurrectionist database? Let's find out. We're gonna bring in Kristi Noem. She's the executive director of Public Wise to talk about this. Kristina, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. First of all, what is Public Wise?
Public Wise is a national organization that was founded in 2019, and our mission is to protect the rights and the will of the people. And we believe in doing that by fighting for equity and democracy.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. How so?
So we do this through three ways. One, we put out nonpartisan 501c3 research. So we research things like the behaviors of non-voters. We did focus groups of voters who were registered to vote but choose not to vote in 2020, which we know there was record number of turnout. We wanted to see what the reasons were that people chose not to vote. And we found things like a lack of accountability, disenchantment with the political and electoral systems. And we are also testing messaging about how to engage those folks, that we can be looking not just cycle to cycle, but building out the electorate and generation to generation. Another way we do this is we do this by granting to trusted messengers in the communities that we're trying to build up. We are supporting groups that are trying to build power in what we call the rising electorate. So things like new immigrants, LGBT voters, young voters, voters of color, and rural voters. So we know that traditionally these are voters that are considered low propensity. We consider them actually high potential. So we know that also we're not the best messenger in all of those communities. So we grant to the people who have networks and who are doing really wonderful work on the front lines. And the last part is we do our own organizing work. Many of us come out of the campaign world. We are working in states, which, and we'll talk about the insurrection index. We're working in states this cycle where there is a higher density of insurrectionists that are running for office. We have a C4 and a PAC where we'll be doing some turnout work and endorsement work and trying to stop the flow of insurrectionists coming into government.
Okay, real quick before we get to the insurrectionist, is there a lower percentage of Democrats that vote than Republicans? Based on your work about people who don't show up to vote?
You know, I'd actually have to check that. We haven't done research specifically on that. We'd have to pull other research. We did do work across political ideology of people who chose not to vote, and I can look at what the sampling was of that and get that to you.
I would be shocked if it wasn't that Democrats vote less as a percentage of the Democrats that are registered, because generally the Democratic Party never does anything, so it's hard not to get disenchanted. Okay, the Republicans do things, but they do things like insurrections. So what is the Insurrection Index database?
So the Insurrection Index came out of our discussions with non-voters across political ideologies. Again, one of the things that people cited was accountability. So of course they didn't say the word accountability. They said things like, people can do things to tamper with elections, people can suppress my vote, people can make my vote not count, and nothing ever happens to them. They don't go to jail, they can run for office, and a couple of years later, no one even remembers what they did. So we took that to heart, and we wanted to look at how we can hold people who participated in the January 6th insurrection, which happened smack in the middle of when we were doing these focus groups. We wanted to look at how we could hold them accountable. So we created a database, and part of the research was done in-house, based basically the criminal charges and looking at the DC docket and seeing who was arrested and where their cases are. But we also funded organizations who were doing really important work and compiled a website, a database, where it's a single point of access where people like the press, or campaigns, where voters can find all the information that they would ever want to know on people who attended, spoke at, funded, or otherwise spread misinformation that led to the January 6th insurrection. So if you go to the website, you can look up a person, you can see if they're running for office, you can see if they're holding office, and then you can see news clips and screenshots in many cases from their own social media of what their involvement was in January 6th.
So I assume that covers regular people that were there on the actual riot and the insurrection, et cetera. And I assume that it covers people who then went on to politics, which some of them did. But does it also cover the politicians that did not want to certify the election and wanted to use the fake electors, et cetera?
That was not, so it does cover that. It was not the only criteria to be in the index. We actually had a criteria of seven different criteria, and people had to meet at least two. So doing that alone would not get you in the index. Doing that and either speaking at the rally, funding the rally, or any of the other pieces would get you in.
Okay, so Mo Brooks as an example, although even that wasn't enough to keep Trump's favor for him, but he did attend the rally, gave a speech, and wanted to decertify the election. So you would track him in your database.
He does have a profile in our database, yes.
Yes. So now the depressing question. Is any of this going to make a difference? And part of the reason I say that is because the Republicans kind of like the insurrection. And so if you tell them that someone was part of the insurrection, they might be more likely to win, not less likely.
So we have seen, to start on the depressing part, we have seen people who are actually running and galvanizing support based on their participation in the insurrection. Ryan Kelly in Michigan is someone who's an example of that. When his house was raided, he actually galvanized support that he didn't have before. It was pretty much free earned media for him. We don't think that the insurrection index is going to win over those voters. What we did is we did research on voters across political ideologies, and we asked their opinions about people who participated in the insurrection. And research like this had existed before we did it, right? So what other research was finding was that fell along political lines. Republicans thought, sure, you were part of the insurrection, fine, you can still hold office. Democrats felt, no, you should not be able to hold office. So we wanted to actually see if there was a tipping point, if there was a bridge too far for some of those Republican voters where we could sort of pick off and see how we can keep these folks out of office. So we asked things like, if they funded a bus, should they be allowed to hold office? Still along party lines. If they attended, should they be able to hold office? Still along party lines. And we went deeper and deeper into different levels of involvement. And when we found that there was a bridge too far, was the idea of coordination in advance. So the question was, if someone had coordinated in advance with insurrectionists, should they be allowed to hold political office? And even the majority of Republican and conservative voters said, no, they should not be allowed to. So we do think that there is messaging. We do think that there are stories to be told about January 6th that could make a difference, and which is why we're leaning so hard into telling the story and to showing profiles and showing the connections of people who coordinated in advance.
Did you guys test violence at all? Because now, we've got stories about Donald Trump saying that he doesn't want to do anything when he found out that his supporters were trying to murder his vice president. And apparently Mark Meadows said, you heard him, Pat, he thinks he deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. Pat Cipollone, who was the White House counsel, told Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, something needs to be done, Mark, or the blood is going to be on your effing hands. I'm curious whether that moves a Republican voter or they're like, yes.
Again, I think there will be voters that are galvanized by that. We are going to be doing additional testing since there's been so many revelations since last Tuesday or since this Tuesday. It seems like forever ago, but it was just this Tuesday. Since there's been so many more revelations and so many connections showing that this was a premeditated attack where violence was known to have been happening and it was known that the crowd had weapons, we want to see how that is affecting voters. Based on our last research, it should actually be picking away voters, but we actually do want to field another survey and see how people are reacting to this.
And what did your survey say about charging people with crimes? Because when you ask that question, basically 8 out of 10 Democrats say, yeah, Trump is legally responsible and there should be legal consequences for it. When it gets to independents, that falls to a majority, but a slight majority that say he should be held accountable. And among Republicans, only 13% think he has any responsibility, and only 8% think he should be prosecuted. Do you guys have different numbers than that? And do you think it might make a difference if they were charged?
There was a lot of existing research on that, so we didn't go further. Something I do want to point out, though, is Pew did a survey on what attitudes were uneven attention towards the insurrection. And it was interesting to see that the majority of Republican voters, this was again well before the last bombshell testimony, but the majority of Republican voters felt that there was too much attention being paid to the insurrection. We have actually seen in our conversations with campaigns around the country where people don't feel like the insurrection is polling well in motivating voters. But Pew did find that the majority of Black voters felt that, or the Black voters that were polled, felt that there wasn't enough attention being paid. So again, we see not only down party and ideological lines, but down race lines.
Yeah, and if anyone has been the victim of violence from the right wing in this country, it has been African Americans historically and to this day. So they might be understandably more sensitive to it. I wish we all were, because with it now we're debating insurrection, good or bad, violent uprising against the politicians, murdering vice presidents, good or bad? No, bad, obviously bad. And unfortunately, these are the dark times we're in. That's why Kristina's organization has to do a database of all the people who were involved in an insurrection and then tell people your decision on whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. Wow, this country's in a lot of trouble. But Kristina, Executive Director of Public Wise, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. All right, we've got a lot more violence in this country, unfortunately, recently, especially with guns. But the group being affected among the most is Black women. And we're going to discuss that right now with Abene Clayton. She's the lead reporter for The Guardian's series Gun and Lies in America, Guns and Lies, and Edwin Rios, senior reporter for Racial Equity. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so Abene, let me start with you. First, tell us about the state of affairs as we speak now. How much are Black women affected? And then begin to tell us why we're seeing the disproportionate effects.
Yeah, of course. So the most recent numbers we have are for 2020, where it's been pretty well known by now that homicides went up by about 30%. Most of them were with guns. And when we looked at, deeper at the homicide data, we found that for Black women, the homicide rate increased by 33%, and that was higher than any demographic, male or female, outside of Black men. So given that that number was so stark, a main question was, why is this happening? And there are a lot of gaps in FBI data, and CDC data only gives you the cause of death. So based on what was available, we found that it's a combination of domestic violence and community violence, where women were getting into their cars or were, coming into their homes and were caught in the crossfire of another shooting. And outside of that, it was domestic violence situations where a gun was available and someone used that to kill their partner. But there are a lot of gaps in this data, like I mentioned, that make it difficult to understand the exact circumstances that these women are dying under, which is troubling based on how much that rate increased, which again was 33%.
Yeah, so Edwin, it looks like about half of the murders are from people that knew them. So whether it's domestic partner, or family, or friends, et cetera. Now that's, I think, fairly normal, but I don't know the numbers for how you would compare that, for example, to white women. Is it more than half are white women? Is it less than half are white women? Do you know that, Edwin, so we can get a sense of how people are being affected?
Yeah, at this point, it's, as Abene pointed out, there are gaps in the data, but, at this point, we do know that Black women, in that sense, the cause or who we know around, who was killed or who perpetuated the violence, like it is more than white women, and it's pretty standardized around, across racial groups in that sense.
Yeah, Abene, of course, another factor in America is guns, and that's part of why it's in the series Guns and Lies, I imagine. So 3/4 of the killings were done with guns. Just so for the American audience, because we live in a bubble here, that's not normal, is it, in other countries?
No, I mean, not that I know of. Being an American journalist that works for a British newspaper, there's always a lot of kind of shock around just how many homicides are with guns. There was about 1,500, I believe, Black women killed, around that number in 2020. And to have 75% of them be with guns is something that is unfortunately unsurprising for a gun violence reporter who knows how ubiquitous firearms are. But if you're looking at this from a place where guns are nearly impossible to get unless you're in like the army or on a police force, I could see how it's completely shocking. But here, like you said, in this bubble, finding that number was unfortunate, but unfortunately unsurprising.
Yeah. So look, these are all really hard questions. So Edwin, I'll start with you, but I'm just so perplexed by some of the numbers, because Black women who live in Wisconsin or Michigan have a higher homicide rate than Black women who live in Mississippi or Alabama. But for white women, it's the opposite. Why? Do we have any idea why that's the case?
In those instances, we don't. It's so interesting, though, that and it's so interesting that you point out those geographic differences, because in the Midwest, it's not as if it's just happening in big metropolitan areas. It's happening across states, and so that's incredibly troubling as well to point out. And it's also worth noting. It speaks to the fact that you may think of this as a Southern issue or Northeast issue, but really it's for Black women, it's an issue nationwide and particularly concentrated in the Midwest. I did some reporting upcoming focused on DC, and Washington DC, our nation's capital, and that's where the second largest increase amongst homicides against Black women took place, right after Kentucky. And so it goes to show that it's not necessarily confined to major metropolitan areas, as pundits may push it, but like that narrative is pushed. It's more so that this is a national problem, and it's a silent epidemic at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of epidemics here, because in 2020 in Wisconsin and Ohio, the number of Black women being killed was doubled. That's, again, just stunning. And so, Abene, I gotta try to figure that out. So we know there was a crime increase in the last couple of years. There's a couple of logical answers, and I don't love them, but I understand it. So, for example, I'm a progressive, but when we said, when there's some laws are passed that in some jurisdictions that if you steal under $1,000, there's not going to be much of a criminal consequences. A lot of people start stealing things under $1,000, right? And so when you have mass, it was easier to get away with stuff. So some of it is but why does the homicides and gun homicides of Black women in particular increase during the pandemic? I have no earthly idea. Do you know why?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we talk about crime increasing, I think it's important that we acknowledge that it wasn't just this kind of broad spectrum of crime that had this alarming increase. It was homicides, a lot of them with guns across the nation. It was almost, if not fully, 30%, and most of the people, disparately, most of the people who were dying were Black men. It was, Black folks make up maybe 6% of the US population, were nearly half of the homicides in 2020. So I think when we talk about crime, it's really important to to acknowledge what was most hurting folks and what most can show us larger gaps in systems. I think that's one of the things that we see among Black women is that these kind of unique vulnerabilities aren't necessarily acknowledged that often. For example, Black women were overrepresented in the industries like food service and like entertainment, where they were either being laid off or they were at most risk of COVID. All of this happened amid an unprecedented public health crisis that had intense economic fallout, and that fallout most impacted or disparately impacted Black women. A lot of them are charged with being caretakers in and outside of the home. They're making the money and they're coming back to cook the food that they buy. That's something we heard kind of across states. So I think when gun violence started to tick up for a number of reasons, I think a lot of it had to do with increased economic stress and anxiety. And then there were buffers, like being able to go to a friend's house, being able to like go to a movie, as simple as going like out to a park or a restaurant, that people had, to not feel the stress of the everyday world and the stress of living in an underserved community where there was already a lot of unaddressed gun violence. So things like community violence prevention programs and peace rallies and some of these things that communities had put together to try to keep themselves safe were pretty much eliminated because it wasn't safe for folks to gather. So I think that had more to do with it. It's a little bit harder to study that, but anecdotally, I've heard from a number of, violence interventionists and folks who work in community healing that stress and the taking away of community had a lot to do with gun violence. And when we saw what was going on among Black men, it's hard for me to say, but a lot of that ends up falling on Black women as well. If you're in a neighborhood that's seeing an increased level of violence, there's that bystander situation that happens. When you're in a home that's not safe for you and someone has access to a gun, you throw on economic and world pressures. And unfortunately, conversations and tensions became deadly, and that becomes all the more troubling when access to a gun is not as difficult as it is in a lot of other countries. So due to gaps in data, around victim offender relationship and circumstance, it's really hard to pin down exactly why this is happening for Black women. And there's not a lot of reporting on this outside of what myself and our colleague Lois are doing and what Eddie is doing. So it's tough to say, but I think a lot of it has to do with the additional stressors that the pandemic brought on, all coming down onto a group that was already trying to make it work without a lot of support from the outside world. If anything, these women were the support, for the outside world amongst their communities. So the reason is, it's tough to pin down, but the effect and the impact is something that we're really trying to have come through, so that folks who can study what the exact causes are will have a few more stories, make it feel a little more relevant so we can really understand what's going on in a scientific way.
Yeah, I think your answer is the best guess. Because seriously, in your guys' articles, I see that wealthy neighborhoods have less fatal shootings. And people might think, oh, urban, non-urban. No, it's mainly has to do with stress, right, within the family. And wealthy neighborhoods have less economic stress. It's not to say they don't have any, but they have a lot less economic stress. And of course, the lethal part of it, the equation for us here in America is everybody has guns. So the minute the stress boils over, we just kill each other. Which doesn't happen in other countries. So Edwin, last question to you, which is I've now asked you 3 impossible questions at least. So how do we fix this? Is any inkling of how to make this better?
When you talk to advocates about this, it's almost the solutions are deeper investments in communities, deeper investments in advocates are very quick to call for, let's have deeper protections for women, or we need to strengthen gun laws, which is, completely obvious in terms of just how ubiquitous guns are in America.
right, welcome to Young Turks. Cenk Ugaritic is sparing with you guys. We both decided off air that we were very good. So now, of course, that'll fall apart as soon as we start the news. We're gonna have a mass shooting in the beginning, and then Democratic.
America.
Yeah, of course, and then
giving you a little taste of America.
Yeah, followed up immediately thereafter by Democratic incompetence. So welcome to America.
As my mom says when I call her, same old, same old.
And as your dad says, what's the hell?
What's the hell? Yeah. Well, we'll tell you what's the hell. That's what.
So here we go. Speaking of which, maybe we should rename the show "What's the Hell." Anyway.
By the way, a little bit of a side note. I'm feeling real cute today.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you know what? I can match that too. Why come to me?
Don't do it. Don't do it. All right.
All right. Now, bad news.
Yes. Okay. Let's get serious because this is devastating. But this is just one of the most common stories in America. Let's do it.
Police say the gunman took a sniper-like position, firing onto the parade from a roof using a high-powered rifle.
And then you heard people screaming, "Bodies down, run for your life." That's what I heard.
Dr. David Baum, along with Dr. Lauren Schechter, were at the parade with their families, initially running for safety, then turning back around and treating the wounded.
All of a sudden, there was a stampede of people coming, and then I realized it was gunshots, and I literally just thought to myself, this is how it's going to end.
A story that's all too common here in the United States, where mass shootings happen literally every day, and the holiday weekend was no exception. A 22-year-old gunman opened fire from a rooftop during a 4th of July celebration in Highland Park, Illinois, killing 7. The death toll has actually increased to 7 and injuring 38. And the wounded ranged in ages from 8 to 85. Now, the suspect has been identified, and after a manhunt was arrested. His name is Robert Crimo III. He also, again, climbed to the roof of a business using a ladder in the alley. He fired more than 70 bullets, and as of now, we don't know what the exact motive is, although the authorities have ruled out a possible terrorist attack. They're trying to figure out what motivated him, and apparently he is cooperating with the authorities. He also posted all sorts of violent fantasies online and had been visited by the authorities 2 times in recent years. He had also legally purchased the rifle that was used in the attack in the Chicago area. He had another rifle, apparently also bought legally, in the car with him as he was taken into custody on Monday evening, about 10 miles away from the scene of attack. We have a few more details in the next video. Let's take a quick look at that.
Authorities launched a county-wide dragnet looking for the shooter. More than 8 hours later, a North Chicago police officer spotted the person they were looking for, attempted a traffic stop before the man led police on a short pursuit. This video appears to show the man whom police say can be considered a suspect on the ground, taking him into custody. Police identified the alleged shooter as 22-year-old Robert E. Crimo III. He grew up in the same Chicago suburb he targeted. A number of social media posts from the suspect have been uncovered, including disturbing music videos.
So I want to just briefly talk about the social media posts. They might give some insight to what his possible motives were. And again, it's still under investigation. Crimo's most recent video posted to YouTube showed him in the aftermath of a school shooting. It ends with him draping himself in an American flag. Another music video, he's a wannabe rapper, showed a cartoon depiction of a man wearing a shirt with his YouTube channel's logo on it, holding a long gun and being shot by police. Crimo had his own Discord server also that featured a politics board filled with nihilistic political memes. The most recent post before the shooting, which was posted in March, was a picture of Bud Dwyer, the Pennsylvania state treasurer who shot and killed himself on live television in the late 1980s, along with the caption, "I wish politicians still gave speeches like this." And as I mentioned earlier, he had been investigated, well, his own family members had asked the police to show up to their home because he threatened to kill everyone in that home. And they also notified the cops about the fact that he had a giant inventory of weapons, including knives, a sword. All of that was confiscated as the cops visited his home back in 2019. The cops also visited him yet again in 2020, I believe it was, because of similar complaints about his behavior. In fact, the school had mentioned that he was showing some concerning signs. He had emotional issues dating back to when he was in middle school. And the family was offered resources as a result of that, but they declined to use them. His parents opted to homeschool him instead. And as I mentioned, cops visited him in 2019. They also took a dagger and a sword from his possession. And even though Illinois has a red flag law, it's only 2 years old. So it's unclear whether or not that law would have been in effect at the time when the cops had visited his home, a few years ago. Cenk.
Yeah, okay, so a number of things here. First of all, is he a Trump fan? Well, he's got a couple of pictures with the Trump flag, one of which you saw in that video, draped on his back, and appears to be right wing. The police have declared it to be not terrorism. Why? Because he's white, let's be honest, okay? So how would they know if this radical murdering right winger is not a terrorist? They haven't even talked to him yet. I think that they just mean, oh, we found out he's not Muslim. I got news for you. The FBI says the #1 source of domestic terrorism is white supremacists, right wingers, extreme right wingers. So no, the authorities are not correct at all. We have no idea why he did it, and terrorism is definitely a possibility.
Can I just jump in on that? Because look, I think it's wrong to say this was definitely a terrorism or terrorist attack. We just don't know. But it is interesting that on one hand, the authorities say we're still investigating this, we don't know what the motive was. On the other hand, they've already ruled out that this is a terrorist attack, which I think is fascinating because it's like, how do you say that if you don't know what the motive is yet?
Yeah, right? They do it. Yeah, it's super obvious. Everyone who isn't dishonest knows. They do it based on skin color and based on his religion. If he was Muslim, everyone knows they would think that terrorism was the #1 reason. Again, without even talking to him. They don't know, they say they don't know why. But if he was Muslim, they would have called it potential terrorism. He's a white right winger and they say it's definitely not terrorism. No, the bias is massive, okay? So now, other issues. So red flag laws that Anna mentioned there. Where, what? They're not gonna do any red flag laws. Everything they passed was junk, okay? They did a junk, useless bill that was Republican CYA operation, cover your ass as if they're doing something.
You're talking about the congressional,
Congress, yeah.
Right, so what I was referring to in terms of red flag laws is in Illinois specifically, they passed a state red flag law.
Yeah, okay, right. God bless their hearts. But the Illinois case proves why the federal one is going to be totally useless. Because the minute you go and say, hey, someone's a psycho and threatening to kill people, we're gonna take their guns away, the right wing goes nuts. They go apoplectic. They're like, how dare you take beloved guns away from beloved right wingers who threaten to murder people, free speech. And you all know it. What are you pretending that's not the case? Right wingers, you're really gonna be okay with somebody saying, hey, the authorities should take away guns from someone who says they're gonna kill people because they're mad about politics.
No, they're not okay with it, which is why we don't have red flag laws in many of the red states. And that is particularly the reason why we don't have a strong red flag provision in the legislation that was signed by Biden. That was the congressional legislation. It included funding for states that have red flag laws, but it did not implement a federal red flag law.
I mean, it was the most useless piece of trash legislation you could ever imagine. So of course, nothing happened. Now I'm gonna go to our members because they make 2 excellent points and I love doing the show with you guys. Opinionated wrote in what? No 60 bullets to stop him? Of course, he's white. That gets to a story we're gonna do about Jalen Walker a little bit later in today's show. He was an African-American guy. They shot him well over, they fired at least 90 rounds and hit him 60 times, including when he was dead on the ground for seconds at a time.
And they handcuffed him after the fact.
And afterwards they handcuffed him. In this case, guy murders 7 people, Wounds 36, taken in, no problem, not a shot fired. I don't know if they took him to Burger King afterwards or Red Lobster or wherever they took him. But somehow the white right-wingers are always captured without a single shot being fired. It's a black guy who, by the way, turned out to be unarmed. He's got 60 bullet holes in him. 60, okay? The correct answer is not to put 60 bullet holes in white people either. The correct answer is for the cops to do their jobs and not go around shooting black people for no reason. Okay, and then Dirge wrote in, wait, the shooter used a ladder. Quick, call Ted Cruz and tell him that he has a better scapegoat than doors, ladders, burn all the ladders. Now, I mean, it's funny, but it's true. Is it the ladders? Is it the doors? Is it the windows? No, you morons, it's the guns. Everyone knows it's the guns, except for the goddamn liars that we humor for no reason.
So a few other things I want to mention, including what he did to essentially blend in with the crowd or disguise himself. So right wingers have seized on this as a talking point, but I want to make sure that we get out ahead of it and give you the information necessary. So in order to disguise himself, he decided to dress in women's clothing. And so the right wing is trying to make a point about how dangerous transgender people are, of course, which is just a distraction, a way to sow more hatred and fear toward a powerless group of people in this country that are already being victimized and persecuted by these political leaders. But the fact of the matter is he is not transgender and he wore women's clothing to blend in with the crowd and disguise himself. And the authorities believe that he was planning this shooting for weeks. And the reason why I brought up all of his social media postings and his history with mental health issues, his history with emotional issues, dating back to middle school, is that despite all of these signs, nothing was done to really ensure that he wasn't a threat to himself and a threat to others, right? So it's just incredible because I can't help but think about all of those stories that we covered years ago involving random high school students who would literally post rap lyrics from rap songs on social media, and then they would get a visit from the authorities, some of whom, by the way, got arrested as a result of their posts on social media. It just blows my mind that we see this happen more and more often, where they post insanely disturbing things on social media, on Discord, on 4chan, on whatever forums they have. Is no one monitoring these forums?
Of course not, because then right-wingers would howl my freedom of speech to talk about murdering you.
No, but the point that they make is, no, I mean, look, this is a mental health issue and there were warning signs. Why didn't anyone double check and see what was going on here? That is anything. Any scapegoat, any excuse to avoid having to talk about gun legislation.
Look, can we keep it real? If we're talking about mental health issues and people threatening to use their weapons and acting in ways that lead you to believe they might be mentally ill, you would have to really take away the guns of about 25% of Republicans. They're online nonstop going, I got Second Amendment rights. I'm gonna go put a bullet in you, try to take my gun away from me. Try to take it, government, cops, military, I don't care. Come and try to take it. I'll bury you, I'll kill you if you try to take away my guns.
Super pro-life of them, by the way.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, I mean, red flag laws. You're threatening to murder cops. Nope. Second Amendment, First Amendment. Second Amendment, First Amendment. I got freedom of speech to threaten to murder everyone I know. And then after somebody does it, you go, oh, well, they should have checked in on that. We tried to check in on you lunatics. And nope, don't check in, but afterwards, don't take my guns. I got it. You love the idea of being able to murder people. I got it. And because of that, you let everyone have a gun. My parents went to Turkey today. And they were worried about, hey, is our political situation okay? Is everything gonna be safe? Are you kidding me? Hurry up and get to Turkey so you can be safe. It's a madhouse filled with massacres here. Who in their right mind would want to stay here? Guys, wake up, because the media is helping to brainwash you. This is the most dangerous country in the world. Our gun homicide rate is like 64 times other developed nations. It's nonstop massacres as far as the eye can see, and no one's gonna do anything about it.
But don't worry. We are allowing the government to make decisions on behalf of women in regard to what they can do with their bodies, because this is a very pro-life country. Again, like, I just really want to drive that point home. The very politicians who want to control women's bodies, who want the government to get involved in what a woman can do with her body, what a woman decides between, her and her doctor, they then turn around and say, no, we can't do anything about guns because in reality, we get paid off and bribed by weapons manufacturers, and we obviously, money talks, and we're gonna look out for our donors. That's the real reason. But then they talk about their hobby and how much they care about the Constitution and the Second Amendment, ignoring what the Second Amendment really says, which is, right to bear arms in a well-regulated militia. They always forget that second part. But more importantly, everything else in the Constitution is just up for interpretation for the right wing, right? When it comes to the separation of church and state, not as important. I mean, it's in the First Amendment, but not as important. Let's funnel public money into private religious institutions in the country. That's what the Supreme Court just ruled. No, we're in a lot of trouble. Because it's not just about finding opposition, members of the opposition party, in this case, Democrats, to fight back. I mean, we know they're weak, we know they're incompetent, we know they're not gonna fight back. But it takes more than fighting back now. The entire system needs to change.
Yeah, look, talk to anyone outside the country. Because you have a skewed perspective inside America because of our media. You talk to people outside the country, they think this place is a madhouse. They can't believe that the right wing has turned this place into an absolute mental asylum, and the Democrats have done nothing to counter it. So to Anna's point, they'll say, wait, your right wingers say that they're pro-life, but they don't mind 19 kids being murdered in Texas because they want their gun rights.
Profits over people.
They're like, well, but they just literally don't get it. They're like, well, how could you be pro-life if you say, no, I want there to be AR-15s that mow down your kids 24/7. They say outside the country, we would never allow our kids to be massacred on a regular basis. What is wrong with you people?
I'll tell you what's wrong with them.
And then on top of that, you claim to be pro-life in favor of saving kids' lives? They're like, it just doesn't make any rational sense at all. What is wrong with you people?
So let's just make it very clear for the international community so they know exactly what is wrong with our politicians. They have been and always will put the profits of corporations, in this case, the profits of weapons manufacturers, over human lives. Profits over people, that is what this country stands for. America stands for profits over human lives. Profits over human lives, profits over human lives. Everything else that the right wing engages in, and to be quite frank, even Democrats engage in, is just culture war stuff to give you the illusion of governing, which is why they've focused on stripping women of their reproductive rights. Not because they actually care about human lives, not because they actually think that zygote is the equivalent of a viable, living, breathing human being, but because that's all they can campaign on. The culture war stuff, and that is what they do. So that's why there's that weird disconnect, that huge conflict with, on one hand, Republicans saying, no, we want looser gun laws, even though we know more and more people are gonna die as a result of that, while simultaneously they claim they're pro-life while wanting to control the bodies of women.
Yeah, last thing, can we show the picture of that victim with the blood splattered on her face?
It's graphic, just want to give you that warning. But here's the 18-year-old who posted this, and she says, I can't believe I was in the middle of a mass shooting. I felt safe at this parade for 18 years, and today I got hit with a bullet and nothing will change in America. This is ridiculous. By the way, she's been going to the parade for 18 years, uncertain how old she is. But what I thought was interesting, Cenk, is in response to that, you have a Huffington Post reporter, Anne Brenoff, saying, I am sorry this happened to you. And to everyone else there, it's awful and these shootings just keep coming at us. Please register to vote if you haven't already. Why? Look, I'm not discouraging people from voting, but vote for what?
Vote for what? Losers?
Vote for
loser
who?
Democrats? Loser Democrats who, after this, passed the impotent red flag law and door laws and whatever dumbass things Ted Cruz wanted? For what? For what? For Democrats who are never gonna fight for us? But I wanted to show that picture because the right wing says we should allow this to happen all the time, but we're pro-life. Can you show a picture? These is because the pro-life folks think that this is no big deal. No big deal at all. They have a hobby and they'd like to shoot feral hogs and varmints. And so this is no big deal to the quote unquote pro-life crowd, world's biggest hypocrites.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, Lauren Boebert, as always, is very confused, and we're gonna help her understand the difference between gun laws and how they work in Denmark versus here in the United States. Come right back.
All right, back here during the social break. Guys, a lot of great comments, really interesting comments from the member section. Let's start with Phil, the real deal. He says, funny how here in local news, they talk about him being in a rap club, really in a mostly white school area. They use anything to blame African-American culture. Just watch and see how this turns into rap influenced them. So now hold, that's a great point, but followed up by Kabuki Draken writing in, no one seems to be mentioning that his rap and much of his internet activity seems to reflect QAnon adherence. These Q cult members need to be on terrorist watch lists, but then again, so does the entire GOP. So the guy's into QAnon and rap. Now QAnon is a smaller subset of like literal lunatics. Rap, about 300 million people in the country listen to, and they're like, oh yeah, it's the rap. The QAnon guys say that there's a child eating, literally they eating the children and drinking their blood cult that runs the country. That's not relevant apparently. Rap, because of black people, is relevant to a guy who, by the way, is of course white and a right winger. Jesus Christ, our media is total and utter trash. Okay, Knight Hussein Niet wrote in, always happiest when we have our dynamic duo on tap. Love to see Bocenk and Anna today. Thank you, we appreciate that. The infamous Mr. Joy Boy writes in, why did they declare a right-wing mass murder isn't a terrorist attack? Because right-wing terrorism is now mainstream. Yeah.
It's pretty mainstream.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so both the cops and the reporters look at it and go, hey, we don't want to offend the right wing. So if they just want to shoot all of our kids, that's okay. But just don't offend them. Don't offend them, okay? I'm offended. I'm offended our kids are dead. I'm offended that all those people in that parade are dead. But you're worried about right-wingers' feelings when they promote terrorism throughout the country? 40% of Republicans say it's time for violence.
They love it. They can't wait. They can't wait to use their guns. Let's just keep it real. It's the biggest death cult in the world.
In the world. It makes the Taliban look like a joke. Kid tested Politburo proof says, we need to fortify our parades and create a single entrances and exits. Wait for it. Cruz will say something moronic like that. The guy climbed a ladder and shot from the roof, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This is really important. Samuel wrote in, one of my good friends is a child therapist in Chicago, and one of his clients was at the shooting. The boy had blood splatter on his clothes and refused to change. He said, quote, if the bad man comes back, he'll think he already got me.
This is freedom, right? Is this what freedom looks like? You guys proud of yourselves, right wing? I mean,
remember the girl in Uvalde who smeared her dead friend's blood all over herself. This is America. back on TYT. Cenk, Anna, and Bendex with you guys. Bendex, thank you for joining us on YouTube. We appreciate it. They hit the join button below. You can do likewise. Come help us bring truth to the world. And you see we put member comments in our actual content. You guys are the smartest audience. We love it. TYT.com/join. And thank you to Eldermind Pulse on Twitch who gifted 50 subs. Really appreciate it. All right, thank you, Anna. Go ahead.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the reaction to some mass shootings over the weekend. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert tends to have a little bit of difficulty with things like logic. So we thought we would help her out here a little bit with how she responded to a shooting that took place in a country where shootings don't happen often, Denmark, and how she exploited that tragedy to make a point about how we should further loosen gun laws here in the United States, where gun violence is so commonplace that you really can't go to any celebrations without having in the back of your mind the fear that someone might open fire. Now, I want to talk about what happened in Denmark before getting to Lauren Boebert's comments about it. It all happened over the weekend when a 22-year-old gunman opened fire and killed 3 people in Copenhagen. And the shooting happened at the Field Shopping Mall. The shooter was a 22-year-old Danish man, and he shot people randomly. It's unclear what his motive was when he opened fire, but 24 people were injured. As I mentioned, 3 were killed. The deceased victims include a 17-year-old Danish girl, a 17-year-old Danish boy, and a 47-year-old Russian man who was living in Denmark. Now, the shooter had a history of mental health issues and had contact with the psychiatric health system in Denmark, and he was armed with both a rifle and a knife. Shortly before the shooting, he had uploaded videos on social media where he simulated suicide with the rifle and a gun, and he also said that a specific type of psychiatric medication he was on was not working. The firearms he used during the shooting were posed in the videos, but they were not owned by him. They were not his guns. The authorities believe that they were legally owned by a person living in the same home as the shooter. Now, in response to that, Lauren Boebert decided to take to Twitter to say, quote, "There was just a mass shooting in Denmark, a country with some of the strictest gun laws in Europe. It's time to admit that gun laws do not stop mass shootings." Now, that is a stupid comment if you just take a moment to do a comparison between a country like Denmark and its gun violence versus the United States and its gun violence, especially with its laxed gun laws. Public Citizen responded to Boebert saying Denmark had 3 mass shootings in the last 28 years. The United States had 17 mass shootings in the last 5 days. The difference is quite clear. So this talking point from right-wingers really does blow my mind, because if you want to consider that logic, okay, well then apply it to every other law. We shouldn't even bother with drunk driving laws, because there are still going to be people who are undeterred from drunk driving, and they're going to take to the streets while under the influence of drugs or alcohol or both, and they're going to risk their lives and the lives of others in doing so. So why even bother with drunk driving laws? No, the laws significantly minimize the number of occurrences. In this case, we're talking about mass shootings. Again, in Denmark, just by volume, they have far less mass shootings than we have here in the United States, where again, it's been a common occurrence.
Yeah, so there's 2 definitions of mass shootings that are most popularly used. One is 4 people get shot. Another is that 4 people die, okay? So get shot and get killed. And so if you go by the stricter definition of 4 people being actually killed, what happened in Denmark is not even a mass shooting by American standards. So Boebert's like, can you believe they had a mass shooting? No, we have so many mass shootings that we have a higher standard. By that standard, in the same period of time that Public Citizen's talking about, that 28 years, Denmark didn't really have 3 mass shootings. They didn't really qualify on a couple of those. We, on the other hand, had about 560 mass shootings in the same time period. That's from the stricter definition, at least 4 dead, massacre. In the time that Denmark maybe had 3, but not really, We had 560 massacres, let alone, if you count, by the way, the looser definition that Denmark is using, we have one a day. And you know what that comes out to over the same time period? Over 10,000 mass shootings in America, 3 in Denmark.
It almost seems like stricter gun laws translates to less mass shootings. Am I getting that correctly, or is Lauren Boebert somehow way smarter than everyone else?
Yeah, no, it's not a matter of smart or not smart. It's just a matter of facts. And so there is no question, it's not an opinion. America has an order of magnitude higher mass shootings than every other developed nation, every other nation, period. What is it correlated to? It is correlated exactly to the number of guns that we own. It isn't about the number of video games or rap songs or movies, which the whole world gets. They play a lot of video games in Japan. There's rap music everywhere.
Every country has mental health issues.
Every country has the same amount of mental health issues. So what the only difference is guns. It's super obvious, except to the people who want the guns and who don't mind the massacres.
But look, weapons manufacturers, with their profit motive in mind, are donating huge sums of money to politicians like Lauren Boebert. So on one hand, she will look you in the eye and lie to you while claiming that banning abortion is important, controlling women's bodies, having the government control women's bodies is super important because she's pro-life, except for when it comes to those pesky guns, because money talks. And as long as she's collecting that cash from weapons manufacturers, she's gonna continue, honestly, just embarrassing herself. Okay, no self-respect, lying to the American people about how no, lax gun laws make all the sense in the world, even though there's endless data showing how our lax gun laws translate to more gun-related deaths. In fact, let's do more comparisons between the United States and Denmark. I looked at some data from gunpolicy.org. They do comparisons of various countries and their gun laws. And if you look at this graph, it'll show you the number of gun deaths per 100,000 people in Denmark, okay? That's per capita. And if you look at it, it shows that the number fluctuates a little bit, but it's within the 2-person range, okay? All right, now let's look at the United States, okay? Where, yeah, wow, that's significantly higher. If you look at 2019, for instance, more than 12 deaths per 100,000 people in the United States. So are you really gonna compare the two countries and pretend as though the United States is like, we're better off? There's no, I mean, look, they have strict gun laws in Denmark and it's made no difference, except it has made a difference, a significant difference in regard to the number of people who die every year as a result of gun-related deaths, gun-related causes.
Look, it's not just Boebert, it's her voters. They just re-elected her. We covered the primary the other night. She won easily by over 30 points. Remember, this is the American psycho that put out the Christmas card with all of her family, including her kids, including her young kids, holding high-powered assault rifles. Because, I mean, look, if you saw that in any other country, it doesn't have to be a politician. If that's just a regular person, they send out Christmas cards like that. The police are gonna come and talk to them and say, are you okay? Are you giving loaded weapons to your kids? Are you a danger to the community? And they will likely not only take away the guns, but they might take away your kids because you're a literal psycho. And in America, she got easily reelected.
Yeah. Republican
voters are like, oh, you're arming your 9-year-olds with weapons. So I don't know the exact age of the kids in that picture. But your teenagers, etc. And there's nonstop massacres all around us, and you're promoting it and encouraging it. Great, we love it, okay? So we're the only honest show that's telling you the core of the problem is the Republican voters themselves. Everyone else is afraid to tell you what the reality is.
Well, let's move on to something a little different, but kind of related. The American Taliban strikes again. Let's discuss.
Will the state of South Dakota going forward force a 10-year-old in that very same situation to have a baby?
You know what I think is incredible, Dana, in this tragic story, because I heard about this last night. What's incredible is that nobody's talking about the pervert, horrible, deranged individual that raped a 10-year-old. And what are we doing about that?
I agree with you.
What are we doing about those
of
individuals
course,
that do this to these
that is
children?
an important discussion to have.
You rape children. That's an issue that the Supreme Court has weighed in as well.
Listen, I
and
totally understand that,
but what we can do for that little girl, I think we also need to be addressing those sick individuals that do this to our children.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem had a little difficulty answering a question about a 10-year-old rape victim who was impregnated by her rapist and had to travel out of Ohio to Indiana just to get an abortion. Now, Kristi Noem was clearly asked by Dana Bash in that interview, do you think that's right? Do you think it's okay? And she deflected by talking about the pervert who raped her and asked, what are we gonna do about that? I don't know, Kristi. Why don't you talk to the DAs? Why don't you talk to the prosecutors in your state and get that squared away? But how about you answer the question about the fact that a 10-year-old was impregnated by her rapist and had to travel outside of the state. She was lucky enough to have a family that had the resources to travel outside of the state to obtain an abortion in a neighboring state, Indiana, which by the way is working on its own abortion bans. Now, just to give you some more details on that, and then we'll go to the rest of Kristi Noem's despicable comments. The appalling decision to overturn Roe triggered or allowed trigger laws like Ohio's previously unconstitutional 6-week abortion ban to go into effect. That meant a 10-year-old rape victim in that state was denied an abortion because she was pregnant for 3 days past the 6-week ban. Can we just stop for a second? A 10-year-old can die through giving birth. They don't care. They don't care about the insult to injury. They don't care about the fact that, this 10-year-old's life will be absolutely destroyed by being forced. Her body and her life will be absolutely destroyed by having to give birth based on the government, okay? The giant government making a decision on her behalf, forcing her to just be a vessel for what the right wing purports to care about, which is a zygote. But as we know, as soon as that baby is born, they'll abandon that kid, they'll let that kid live and die in poverty, and they won't think about it or care about it for a second, okay? Dr. Caitlin Bernard, an Indianapolis obstetrician gynecologist, said she had received a call from a colleague doctor in Ohio who treats child abuse victims and asked for help. Indiana's lawmakers have not yet banned or restricted abortion, but don't worry, they are likely to do so when a special session of the state assembly convenes later this month. And Cenk, before I go to you, I just want to go to the final video where Kristi Noem is, being badgered by Dana Bash, and I give her credit for that, and has no choice but to finally answer the question. And this is how disgusting and callous this woman is. Let's watch.
A child, should she have to have that baby?
Every single life is precious. This tragedy is horrific. I can't even imagine. I've never had anybody in my family or myself gone through anything like this. I can't even imagine. But in South Dakota, the law today is that the abortions are illegal except to save the life of the mother.
And you would be okay with that, a 10-year-old girl having to have a baby?
No, I'm never okay with that. In fact, that story will keep me up at night. It absolutely will.
So would you try to change the law to have an exception in a situation like this?
Got a 1-year-old little granddaughter named Miss Addie. I can't even imagine. What I would say is I don't believe a tragic situation should be perpetuated by another tragedy. And so there's more that we've got to do to make sure that we really are living a life that says every life is precious.
Let me be clear, I can't imagine if some young girl in her family ends up getting pregnant as a result of someone raping them. But I can also imagine, and this is absolutely what would happen, Kristi Noem and the rest of her right-wing family members will ensure that that young girl gets that abortion. 100%. I guarantee it. And then she goes, no, of course I'm not okay with that. Of course I'm not okay with a 10-year-old giving birth to her rapist child. Okay, except you are. You are okay with that. That is the issue that you have decided to support. You totally believe in the government getting in between women and their doctors, young girls who are rape victims and their doctors. That is who Kristi Noem is. She's got nothing else to offer to her voters. So she's got to rely on the callous nature of the policies that literally force rape victims as young as 10 to give birth to a rapist child. By the way, and as she supports that, what does she do on the side? Loosen gun laws, loosen gun laws. I mean, endless mass shootings, endless death and destruction in this country as a result of that. She's pro-life, right? Pro-life. The only time they're pro-life is when they use that talking point to control women's bodies. That is it.
Yeah, so I guarantee you that they would fly their family member to Paris. They wouldn't want to get caught driving to another state. And so they're rich Republicans. They're not gonna follow the rules. They never do. We've told you countless stories of Republicans going and getting abortions and then rejoining picket lines in front of the abortion center. And when asked, what, isn't that the most hypocritical thing in the world? They say, oh, no, I wasn't a slut. The rest of them are sluts. God damn it, that's how they think about women. These idiots. So why did she not answer the question directly? She did eventually. Eventually she finally said, we can't have one tragedy lead to another tragedy. So no, South Dakota would not allow that child to get rid of the zygote inside of her body before it grows into an actual baby that she has to carry for 9 months and then give birth to and then raise the rest of her life, okay? All right, so.
With no help from the state, by
of course not.
Zero help.
And then Kristi Noem would throw bootstraps at her and go, what are you, poor? Oh, what do you want, more unemployment for your parents? Paid family leave, child tax, we're not gonna give you anything, right? That's what Kristi Noem would say, because she's a monster. Why didn't you just answer the question? Because you're embarrassed. Why are you embarrassed? Because your position is monstrous. And you know that Americans don't agree with you at all, except your crazed lunatic base, who's like, control the women, make the 10-year-old have the rapist baby, make her. That's Republicans, you're voting that way. Don't tell me you're not, because that's exactly how you're voting. So that face I just did and those words I just said, that is you, Republican voters. That's exactly you. So hey, just come out and be open and honest for the first time in your lives. Just say, I just want to control women's bodies. I want the big government, tyrannical government, to snatch their bodies and say, you're not allowed to control your body for 9 months. Because why? She made the mistake of getting raped by an adult. And then they say, oh, QAnon, and we're worried about child molestation and stuff. Then it's the government molesting that young girl for 9 more months, saying, no, you have to keep that inside your body. You people are the sickest people I've ever met. That's why you're embarrassed. That's why you're embarrassed.
But barely.
We're not embarrassed about our position at all, 0%, because we are correct and you are morally inferior to us. Oh, wow, did I just say something you say for the last 40 years? Oh, Democrats, they're not morally right. Oh, they'll do abortions, we're morally better. No, you're morally inferior. You're evil people, evil. Okay, try to be a decent person for a change.
No, it's not in their nature.
Okay.
They don't know how to be decent people. Let's talk about life and death in a state like South Dakota. Because turns out South Dakota, one of the red states that's extreme when it comes to anti-choice legislation, but also pretty extreme when it comes to infant mortality. So we're talking about women who want to keep, they want to keep the pregnancy through term. They want to give birth, and we live in a country with all sorts of pick yourself up by the bootstraps garbage that usually ends in death for a lot of people, including newborns. So if you look at the infant mortality rate, the states with the highest infant mortality rate tend to be red states. In South Dakota, it's 6.9 infant deaths per 1,000 live births. Let's take a look at where South Dakota fares. These are the top states with the highest infant mortality rates. So as we've talked about before, Mississippi comes in at number 1, then you've got Louisiana, West Virginia, Arkansas, Alabama, South Dakota, and then North Carolina. You guys noticing a trend there? Then you look at the states with the lowest infant mortality rates. Again, these are live births, right? That end in the baby dying, doesn't survive. Vermont has the lowest with 0, which is kind of miraculous. Then you've got California, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey. It's interesting how the states with the lowest infant mortality rates tend to be states that not only have better laws in regard to reproductive rights, but more importantly, have stronger programs, a stronger social safety net to help support women, to help support families, to help support children, to help support people in the state living in poverty. You don't get any of that in a state like South Dakota. You don't, because they don't care about lives at all. They don't care about the high rate of infant mortality in a state like South Dakota. It's all about controlling people's bodies. And let me just remind you for the billionth time that while Kristi Noem would have a 10-year-old rape victim give birth to a rapist baby and doesn't see that as a problem, doesn't see it as something that's terrible to her body, doesn't see it as invasive, they can't be bothered to put a piece of cloth over their faces during a contagious pandemic. That was invasive. That was a violation of their bodily autonomy, right? No, they're full of crap. They don't care about human lives. They will avoid doing the bare minimum, knowing full well that doing the bare minimum, like wearing a mask, will stop the spread of a highly contagious and lethal virus. So they don't care. They just don't care.
Take those two facts, combine them, and you see who's actually pro-life and who's not. In the red states, several 100,000 more people died from coronavirus than in the blue states. Why? Oh, mask is anti-freedom. Vaccines are anti-freedom, right? So we'll just have a couple 100,000 of our neighbors die because we don't care about their life at all. Oh, okay, taking care of kids as they're being born? Who cares? Not gonna do it. We're red states. We don't care about life at all.
At all.
So all the red states are the least pro-life. It's just a fact. It's statistically a fact. And the blue states are the most pro-life. Actual life. Those are stone cold facts. Because for Republicans, it doesn't have anything to do with life. Which brings me into my final point. Adam Kinzinger said, when I was colleagues with Kristi Noem, she wasn't like this at all. It's so sad to see her trying to become Trump's running mate, and that's why she's doing this. I don't care why she's doing it. She's a monster. Does that help that she's doing it to appeal to the Republican voters who are also monsters so that they could all work together to help Donald Trump get elected? An even bigger monster. No. Don't give the fact that she's a lying scum politician as an excuse for her monstrous behavior. It doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. None of you are pro-life. All you believe in is oppression.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got some fire for the Democratic Party because they are dazed and confused in regard to what should they do? Should they fight to protect women's reproductive rights? They don't know. It's a big debate. We've got that story and more coming right up.
Back on TYT. All right, I'm gonna read super chats. Jason Ray wrote in, Jenks, she wasn't saying the 10-year-old dying would be the second tragedy. She's saying the abortion would be the second tragedy. She doesn't care. Oh no, I know that. I just read that to you guys because I want to make sure that I wasn't unclear. No, Noem is saying the abortion would be the second tragedy. That's why she would never allow that 10-year-old to get an abortion. She would use the tyrannical government of South Dakota to take away her freedom instead. Prog Rock TV says, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is becoming more prophetic by the day. The GOP has lost its mind and it won't be finding it anytime soon. Remember when that came out and people were like, oh, that looks like what Republicans are doing. Republicans are outraged. Are they even outraged anymore? They probably are thinking, hey, we're almost there, keep going. And then we'll go, hey, then surprise, yeah, that's what we're planning all along. Moonchild Dragon says, we're seeing the end of an empire, it's lunacy. Noelia Brunini writes in, this shows that conservatives only understand tragedy if it only happens to themselves or the ones closest around them. 100% true. Both of those comments are. Jeff Caldwell, Crimo purchased the firearm legally. Of course he did. Laws are so lax that every firearm purchase, no matter where or how, is legal by default. Of course, that's because of right wingers. So I hate all the talk about like, oh, was it purchased legally? it's so easy to purchase a gun. I mean, it's like all the bribes that the politicians take. You'd have to be a moron like Cuellar to get caught taking an illegal bribe.
For real.
But don't worry, rescued by Nancy Pelosi and Jim Clyburn. And by the way, we're gonna do that story about how the Democrats are, I don't know what to do about abortion. Well, step one is don't help anti-choice people get elected to Congress. Wow, that was so hard, okay? By the way, not mentioned in any of the articles. We'll come back to it. Todd's Talk says, could someone save Dems from themselves and also stop the GOP squad before they kill us all with bad policies? Well, Todd, at this point, there's really only one hope left, and we'll talk more about it as we go along. It's a progressive running in 2024. Otherwise, all hope is lost. But a progressive can win in 2024, and obviously that would make all the difference. Benjamin GL writes in, Cenk, I really feel like I'm losing hope. Same message here, same message we hear all the time. Most liberals I know are against doing anything other than voting. What do? I feel like we already lost and are being forced to watch a 4-year-long death. Benjamin.
No, the government is now just an obstacle. They're not here to help you. I mean, it's been this way for a long time, but it's clear now more than ever. So find ways to get around the government. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Find way, like, I'm gonna get abortion pills to women who need it. I'm gonna find a way to make that happen. Don't care. Government is a massive obstacle. They're not here to protect us. They're not here to look out for us. It's time for us to get real about helping out our own communities. And in the meantime, think about ways to develop a strategy similar to what the right wing did. It was a 50-year project for them to overturn Roe v. Wade, right? They were smart about it while everyone else was asleep at the wheel, super complacent and taking our rights for granted. We need to get smart about defending our rights and taking them back strategically.
Yeah, so guys, if you're waiting for Biden or Pelosi or Schumer to do something, don't. If you say your hope was lost there, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it should be lost. There is a 0% chance those losers are ever going to do anything. But that doesn't mean the fight is lost. No, we go get them in 2024. We have to win that primary. No ands, ifs, or buts. TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Hey, all right. So let's get to Democrats and what they've been up to. Politico reports that there is an actual debate taking place within the Democratic Party in regard to whether or not they should fight aggressively to protect women's reproductive rights. I'm not even kidding, it's a debate. And apparently there are the individuals within Congress who think, no, it's really important that we fight for reproductive rights because young voters who really turn up and make all the difference in elections for us might not show up if we don't support the issues that they want us to support. Congratulations, you just made the most obvious statement ever. But here's what Politico writes. The fear is that the youngest voters who smashed participation records in the last 2 elections and backed Joe Biden by a 25-point margin in 2020 won't vote in the midterms. Some Democrats stress that the Biden administration and Congress need to do more to show their rage and willingness to take significant action to mirror the passion seen among young people, 3/4 of whom support abortion being generally legal. Now, on young Democratic voters and their views on abortion, apparently there's a little bit of a disconnect between the young voters who honestly have everything on the line when it comes to reproductive rights by the very nature of them being young and fertile, versus older Democratic voters who are typically in their elderly period of life and don't have to worry about unintended, unwanted pregnancies. So not only did 3/4 of them say, meaning the young voters, abortion should be generally legal, 30% said that it should be legal in all cases. But according to Pew Research, 54% of voters over 65 said abortion should be legal by contrast. So the real question here is, for the Democrats engaging in this debate, legislatively speaking, Do we care at all about these young voters, or do we just keep appealing to older voters who don't really care as much about this incredibly important issue? And look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The mainstream Democratic Party is full of corrupt, self-interested, narcissistic losers who have shown us, who have made it very clear that they really don't stand for a damn thing. On one hand, they pretend to care about reproductive rights. On the other hand, you've got Democratic leadership in the form of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn showing up to campaign for an anti-choice loser like Henry Cuellar in Texas when he really had a progressive challenger that they could have supported instead and made all the difference by supporting her instead. This is what they stand for. This is what Democrats are. They're spineless, feckless, corrupt losers. They just are.
All right, so to give you a sense of how devastating this fact is, that young people are dispirited by the lack of action in Democratic politics. I know most mainstream Democrats that watch MSNBC and CNN will be like, oh, young people, it's their fault. It's okay, we'll just get rid of them. We just ignore them.
All right, good luck with that.
If you ignore them, you will lose all elections. So that's a fact. Let me explain why that's a fact. So in Virginia, Biden won the state by 10 points over Trump. But Youngkin, the Republican, beat Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, later in the governor's race. And why did he beat him? Because the electorate was 12% whiter and 8% older. That's all it took. 8% older and you lose. In fact, the Democratic pollster then explained, if that happens in the swing states in 2024, we will lose every single swing state. You will lose every single swing state, Democrats, if you do not deliver something, first of all, for anyone, but also specifically for younger voters. So then I know what you're gonna do next, you morons. You're gonna blame younger voters.
Yep, 100%.
Why don't you actually do something for younger voters when you have power, instead of just constantly doing, oh, donors, we're gonna help the donors. And then, oh, it's young people's fault. No, it's your fault. It's your fault for doing nothing.
100%.
And by the way, none of the media ever tells you that. This article, it has important, interesting facts, we bring it to you, but it's also trash. So everything in the article is framed as, it's young people's fault. Democrats, of course, can't do anything. It's just an assumption baked into the article. And the rest is about how blaming young people for not voting. So let me just give you two quotes here.
Okay.
That's important. So they go to this Democratic pollster, Terrence Woodbury, and very average, normal Democratic pollster. And he says, even so, Democrats think this kind of political theater is what voters, especially Gen Z, need to see to value signal that they're willing to fight for them.
Yeah, we're not interested in theater, okay? We get plenty of theater from Democratic leadership. We get the kente cloth Neil sessions, we get the poetry readings from Nancy Pelosi. We ain't interested in theater. We're interested in action. That is what people are interested in.
And do you get what the Democratic consultants are telling the Democratic politicians?
Just virtue signal to your young voters, but value signal. They renamed it value signal. We're not interested in value signaling. We're interested in elected lawmakers who were elected by people into these positions of power to actually represent their best interests, to do just that. Represent their best interests, counter the damage and destruction and the suffering that's being implemented by the Republican Party. You know, the issues that you campaigned on. The issues you campaigned on. How about you carry out those policies? But they don't. They love the convenient Henry Cuellar excuses. They love the convenient Joe Manchin excuses. Never mind the fact that LBJ managed to get the Civil Rights Act passed at a time when racism was like front and center, okay? Didn't matter. He would use any method, any strategy necessary, whether it was carrots or sticks in the form of coercion, threats, intimidation. He didn't care. That's politics, baby. But the Democratic Party has been castrated by their corporate donors, and they have taken our votes for granted. They think that they're entitled to our votes, even after they do nothing for us. Nah, we're not playing that game anymore. Sorry. Joe Biden would be stupid to run again in 2024. He needs to sit his ass down, take his nap. Take your nap, Joe. Take your nap. Why do you want to run again in 2024? You're ineffective. You are a failure. You have failed the electorate. You have all these people showing up to vote, canvassing on your behalf, ensuring the 2 Democrats won the Senate runoff races in Georgia because you said it was so important to have that majority in the Senate. And then you turned around and did nothing for the American people. Sit down, don't run again. It would be a massive mistake.
I gotta add up to something.
I hate the Democrats. Let me just be clear about that, okay? Republicans, garbage. This is not an endorsement of what the Republicans are doing. I am furious that the corporate Democratic Party fearmongers about the right wing and then enables them. That is all they do. They enable them day in, day out. I despise these people. They all need to be primaried. They need to sit down, get the hell out of the way, and let actual leaders do the governing. Sorry, Cenk, go ahead.
Yeah, so to build on what Anna was saying, do you remember them saying, hey, if you get us the 2 senators in Georgia, then we'll need 2 more senators. We're not actually gonna do anything. No, you didn't remember that, right? Because they didn't say that. They said, hey, get us the 2 senators in Georgia and we'll have a majority and we'll get you all of your campaign promises. Then as soon as you got them those 2 senators, what did they say? Just kidding, there's another 2 and we need another 2. And by the way, please don't be a schmuck. If you give them 2 more Democratic senators, look, I'll be happy because it's not Republican senators. I mean, we're talking about this much difference at this point. But do you think that's gonna make a difference in actually getting anything passed?
Nope.
Of course not. Then they'll say they need 2 more senators. If you gave them 20 senators, and I'm not exaggerating, if you gave the Democrats 20 more senators, they would say they need 2 more senators.
It's your fault. You're not voting hard enough. It's your fault. The onus is on you. That is what the mainstream Democratic Party is telling its base as we speak.
I'll make a prediction right now, okay? And it's not gonna happen because the Democrats aren't gonna win. But if the Democrats got 2 more seats and had 52 seats in the Senate, the thing that they say that they won, and they kept the House and they kept the White House, do you think they would do voting rights? They would do women's rights, they'd pass a national law to make abortion legal. They would do child tax credit, any of the things that they promised. I got news for you. They wouldn't do a single one of those things. So if you're in the media and you're not talking about how they're lying, you're not really a reporter, you're just filleting them, okay? So here, I'll give you another nonsense quote, because you know what the reporters do is they go and talk to like-minded conservative Democrats, and then they quote them, go, this isn't my opinion. Just everyone I talked to said it's really the voters' problem and not Biden and the powerful people problem. Powerful people are awesome, okay? So they found John Della Volpe, director of the Harvard Youth Poll, hilarious. He said, I think the Gen Z participates in 2022, period. And they can have an even greater impact than anyone considered if this righteous anger is properly channeled through a coordinated and localized strategy to make things right.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. I love that wishful thinking. Yeah, Gen Z is gonna make all the difference by turning up to vote for a party that has given it the middle finger over and over again, that has not delivered on even the most basic agenda items. Let me give you more, okay? This is the part that, this is the disconnect. This is the heart of the debate within the Democratic Party. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted that Democrats cannot make promises, hector people to vote, and then refuse to use our full power, ticking through a list of potential actions the party could take, including moving to expand the Supreme Court, that was shot down by Biden. Opening abortion clinics on federal lands, also shut down by the Biden administration, and repealing the Hyde Amendment. Not even a consideration, not even on their radar. Okay, so there are things they could do. I mean, it's incredible to see the kind of power that Donald Trump was willing to wield versus the power that the Biden administration just leaves on the countertop, walks away, tells you, can't really do much for you. Please vote harder. Please vote harder. Now let's go to the response from people like Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris pushed back on that frustration in front of a room full of donors.
Of course she did. Where else would she be?
Defending Biden's urging to vote in November. She says, quote, I know some people are saying, stop talking to us about the elections, we know. Don't trivialize the significance. We can't afford to. because Democrats' margins in Congress are razor thin. It doesn't matter if you guys are in the majority, you don't do anything with that power anyway. Now again, I think people should exercise their right to vote, do so in an informed way. But my problem is with the Democratic Party taking our votes for granted, thinking that it's not something they have to work for, it's not something that they have to deliver for, that it's just something that's automatically granted to them because the other side is so terrible and so vicious. Well, the other side is terrible and vicious, and you've done nothing to stop them. So why would anyone feel motivated enough to turn up to vote knowing full well that you will not deliver the very basic protections and agenda items for the Democratic Party? Come on.
Okay, so I'm just the last couple of things here on what they can do because we're constructive. So AOC came up with a whole list, and then instead of saying, oh, that's a good list, we'll tell you what we can and can't do on that list. And there could be reasons why you can't do a particular proposal, right? No, they turned around and blamed AOC for letting people know that there are actually things that they could do. They're like, shush, what are you doing? People are gonna find out that we don't wanna do anything. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point, okay? Then CNN does a story about how Joe Biden is befuddled. He's like, no, I'm trying to be the anti-Trump. That's why he tried to use his power inside the White House. I'm trying not to use my power. Moron, total utter moron. And he's like, well, I'm sitting here doing nothing. I don't get it. I'm the Democratic president. Everybody should be kissing my ass. And he's like, they had a call. They brought on activists and celebrities. And even the celebrities who are super, not progressives, liberals. Liberals meaning like old school, like, oh, let's do theatrics and not really.
Deborah Messing is a good example.
Yeah, Deborah Messing loves Hillary Clinton, loves Joe Biden, right?
Yep.
And oh no, Bernie Sanders will actually do things. Oh no. We kind of like this. Even they're fed up to hear. Deborah Messing started yelling at them. She's a diehard Hillary Clinton supporter. Started yelling at them on the phone. Wait a minute, why did you guys invite us on this call? I thought we were gonna get an action plan. What is your plan? What is your plan? They're like, oh, we don't have one yet. The leak was 6 weeks ago. And afterwards they're like, oh no, this is why we invited you on the call. Because we want you to share TikTok videos of Biden.
No, it's insane. It really
losers.
CNN wrote a piece on this as well. I gotta read you a few excerpts.
Okay.
Top Democrats complain Biden isn't acting with, or perhaps is not even capable of, the urgency the moment demands. Rudderless, aimless, and hopeless is how one member of Congress described the White House. It gets worse, by the way. So try to follow along with this and not lose your mind. More than a week after the abortion decision, top Biden aides are still wrangling over releasing new actions in response, despite the draft decision leaking 6 weeks earlier. White House counsel Dana Remus had assured senior aides the Supreme Court wouldn't rule on abortion that day. Unbelievable. A White House press aide assigned to the issue was walking to get coffee when the alert hit. They were completely caught off guard. Completely caught off guard. Unbelievable. Negligence, incompetence. Several Democratic leaders privately mocked how the president stood in the foyer of the White House, squinting through his remarks from a teleprompter as demonstrators poured into the streets, making only vague promises of action because he and his aides hadn't decided on more. He is not fit to be president of the United States. Do not run for re-election. I will not vote for him. Just won't. Yeah. Why? What's the point?
I kind of want him to run so we could run a progressive against him and beat him easily. No one wants this guy. Okay, so
with all the games that the corporate media plays and the mainstream Democratic Party plays, they'll ensure that he's the nominee. They'll ensure it.
Our number one problem is corporate media and the lie on top of lie on top of lie to support obvious losers and idiots that are the corporate Democrats because of their infinite goddamn corruption. Last thing, guys, they at least the Politico piece quoted an actual progressive, Amanda Littman, co-founder of Run for Something. She's been on the show. She had a fun quote. She said, they need to get caught trying. Give us a reason to trust you. So finally someone that makes sense because she's younger, she's progressive. And so, well, what could they do? Because whenever I tweet about this on social media, all the older Democrats that watch MSNBC, they're befuddled just like Joe Biden. Like, what can you do? I don't understand. What can we do? There's nothing we can do, there isn't the votes. Well, yeah, there's nothing you can do if you're a loser.
If you want to put political pressure on people like Lyndon Johnson did, like FDR did, like every effective president of the United States did in a very practical way, you have votes. And then you go, oh, who voted no and who voted yes? Oh, we voted on the filibuster to get rid of the filibuster to get you legalized roe throughout the country, right? Oh, it turns out Manchin and Sinema voted no. So Manchin and Sinema are the bad guys. Now we apply pressure. Joe Biden's like, what? What? Apply pressure? I don't know what that means. When do I give in to Mitch McConnell?
When's my next nap?
Yeah, dude, just Anna's right. I mean, I want you to run so we can kick your ass, but just go home and take a nap if that's what you wanted. Why did you run? Why did you run? And we all know why. Because he has no fire in the belly to get anything done other than Amtrak, okay? Oh, I'm a guy from Scranton and I like to take Amtrak. That's my political theater. Everybody ride it like I'm a normal guy. You've been an insider for 50 goddamn years. Who are you kidding? Yes, corporate media are nonstop liars. Don't believe any of their crap. But Biden didn't have a fire in his belly for a goddamn thing. He ran because of ego.
100%.
Here, I'll decipher it for you guys since the media lies to you. Every politician has a giant, outsized ego. They don't give a damn about you. And if they're Democrats, they're never gonna do what they promise because they didn't run for you. They ran for themselves so they could have high status and respect from their friends in Washington. That's what this is about.
Just playing with our lives. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we have the story of Jayland Walker, who was shot at 90 times by the cops and has 60 bullet holes in his body to prove it. We've got that story and more coming right up.
Joey, baby, you blew it.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was too strong coffee? Yes, new twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 20 billion views. Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively, what do you know? Rob says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man. I can see the voice.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's we do? We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Cool news, shopdyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's a fantastic story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
Well, let's do it. Cops in Akron, Ohio just released body cam footage of the fatal shooting of a young man named Jalen Walker. He was unarmed and running away from the cops at the time that they opened fire. Before we get to the graphic footage, I do want to discuss the details of the story and what prompted the shooting to begin with. The incident apparently began at about 12:30 a.m. last week on Monday, when police say that Walker fled as officers attempted to initiate a traffic stop for traffic and equipment violations. About 40 seconds after the pursuit began, a gunshot was fired from Walker's vehicle. So these are some of the details that are important because the cops are already putting out their messaging about this in an attempt to cover what they did in firing over 90 bullets toward him as he was running away from them. But they claimed, well, we have evidence indicating that he did in fact fire a weapon from his vehicle as he was fleeing from us. And this next video will show you what they're referring to. Let's watch.
Investigators over the weekend shared more about the possible perceived threat the officers faced during the pursuit, including a single gunshot that allegedly came from inside Walker's car while police were chasing his vehicle. They say this muzzle flash image captured by state traffic cameras is evidence, and investigators later recovered a shell casing at that scene.
They also claimed that they recovered a weapon from his vehicle. Now, this is an ongoing investigation, so this is what the cops are saying. Obviously, the facts of the matter might change as the story develops and the investigation continues. After several minutes, Walker got out of his car and fled on foot, police said. Officers deployed tasers, but they alleged they were unsuccessful in subduing him. But what about when he was running away from police? Was he armed at that time? And was he posing an imminent threat to the authorities? Were they justified in opening fire? Well, Walker, according to reports, was unarmed at the time he was killed, though a gun was recovered from his car after the shooting. Akron, Ohio Police Chief Stephen Milet said at a news conference on Sunday, when police released large portions of body cam footage from 13 officers who were at the scene. Now, the shooting is being investigated by the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations. 8 cops fired their weapons, 7 of whom happen to be white, 1 of whom is black. They claim that they thought they saw him turn around toward them and reach for a weapon, which is why they opened fire even as he was running away from them. So I give you all that context, all those details before we go to the video that is getting a lot of attention. It is difficult to watch, so I want to give you that warning. But without further ado, here it is. So just to tell you about the aftermath of the shooting, a medical examiner's report found that Walker suffered at least 60 wounds. They're still trying to determine, though, how many times he was shot and which wounds are entrance wounds and which are exit wounds. In some of the footage, Walker appears to be on the ground as gunfire continues. Walker died from multiple gunshot wounds to the face, abdomen, and upper legs. And after shooting him dozens of times, and after it was obviously clear that he was dead and not a threat, the police decided to handcuff him anyway. Cenk.
Yeah, so first of all, let's note the disparities as usual. Highland Park shooter killed 7, wounded 36. Police took him in without a single shot fired. Charleston shooter without a shot fired. And it goes on and on and on. Mass shooters, right wing, white, no shots fired, taken in, okay? You've got a guy here who, look, the facts are complicated. We don't yet know if the story about the shot coming out of the car is true or not. He did not surrender to the authorities right away, so there's differences in the fact pattern, no question, I'll grant you that. By the way, if you're thinking, well, this is probably a lifelong criminal, etc., there's a gun in the car. No, the family attorney says he has no criminal record at all, never been in trouble with the law. So there's some disparities here, but did they bother to find out? No. Why did they shoot? Because he turned around suddenly. Okay, but if he was gonna surrender, wouldn't he stop and turn around? And you saw the video. They shot him how many times after he was already on the ground? You see it in the video. He's on the ground for seconds and they're shooting and shooting and shooting. I don't know how many times they hit him in the face after he'd already hit the ground. And then after riddling him with 60 bullet holes, literally, they go and handcuff him, as Anna told you, because still the 13 cops there, you never know. You never know. Their life is so much more important than his life, and that is what they have been trained. Now, I tell you that in every one of these cop shootings, right? Now, but I want you to understand, it's not my opinion. So that's the Akron Police Union came out with these statements. They said that the shooting was justified in their actions, quote, including with the number of shots fired. And then they have another quote. They said, the decision to deploy lethal force as well as the number of shots fired is consistent with use of force protocols and officers' training. So they tell you, this is what we do. We murder people like this. We shoot at them 90 times. We put 60 bullet holes in them, including several in their face. If they turn around suddenly, and of course, and if they're black, and then we let them bleed out on the pavement. But if you're a white serial killer or you just committed a massacre, kid gloves, kid gloves. You okay? We can take you to Burger King if you like.
I don't think that the cops in this situation will face any real punishment. I highly doubt that a grand jury would indict them because they're going to point to him allegedly, again, it has not been confirmed yet, but they allege that he shot a gun from his vehicle. They're gonna point to the portion of the video where he turned around and they're gonna say, since he had shot a gun from his vehicle, we had reason to believe that he had a gun on his person and posed a threat as he was running away from us. I'm not saying I agree with what the outcome is likely gonna be. I'm just saying this is what the likely outcome will be. And I say that with frustration and anger because look, even if you agree that this was a dangerous person, right? Okay, we have seen now in multiple mass shootings that the cops are very much capable of apprehending an armed, dangerous person without engaging in an extrajudicial killing. Do we want to live in a society where cops get to decide whether you live or die, whether they're the judge, jury, and executioner? Or do we believe in having a criminal justice system where everyone, every suspect gets to see their day in court? That is the question here. I don't believe for a second that they were unable to apprehend him without shooting him to death, without firing 90 rounds and hitting him 60 times. This is death and destruction. This is what America is. This is what freedom looks like. This is what criminal justice looks like.
Remember, after they shot him 60 times, they didn't find a gun on him. So they found it back in the car, and you can say, hey, that's really bad. Okay, I hear you, and we're sharing all the facts with you. But it turns out he didn't have the gun on him when he was running, okay? By the way, don't run from cops. If you're black and you're running from cops, they'll shoot you in the back. Don't do it. They'll assume you're a threat by definition. If you keep running, they'll shoot you. If you turn around, they'll shoot you. If you put your hands up, they'll shoot you. If you put your hands down, they'll shoot you. Don't run from the cops, okay? I know that means that they're probably going to abuse you and beat the crap out of you, but better than getting murdered.
Or possibly kill you anyway.
Okay. They might kill you anyway, that's true. We've seen videos, there was one in Louisiana, the guy's already handcuffed, he's on the ground, there's 3 cops on him, and they shoot him and kill him anyway, right? I got you. But like, try to minimize the risk to yourself. So the cops say, well, we had reason to believe. I mean, there was a gun that we found later in the car, not where he was, right? Well, you have reason to believe that the Highland Park shooter had a gun. You know why? Because he shot 47 people. You had reason to believe he had a gun, but all of a sudden, it just was putting soft. Oh, is he okay? I hear he's a Trump supporter. Is he okay? Okay, now you had reason to believe Kyle Rittenhouse had a weapon because he showed it to you before and after he did the killings. But you, like him and all of his militia buddies, you gave water to, you gave aid and comfort to, and then there's people dead on the ground, and then you let him go afterwards. Remember, when Kyle Rittenhouse tried to turn himself into the cops with a weapon that he just used to kill 2 people, the cops are like, oh no, you're white and a right winger, free to go, free to go. This is insane, man. Well, so what are we looking for? Are we looking for them to shoot the white guys too? No. We're looking for you to actually do your jobs and protect the citizens, white, black, and otherwise, and have some balance. So it can be a dangerous job. If somebody shoots at you, should you be careful? Of course, you should be incredibly careful. But you got 13 cops on the scene. Can you wait half a second as the guy is turning around, maybe to surrender, and point your weapons at him, but not yet fire? Nope, half a second, 90 shots into him. And why? Because they know they're gonna get away with it. They all know for a fact, the minute they saw that muzzle coming out of the car, they thought, here we go, we got a green light, okay? And they shot the hell out of him.
All right, we got to take a break, and we're gonna lighten things up significantly. So come right back for that.
Back on TYT, Ged Kuzak says, this is all super chat. That was an execution you showed today, not a defensive shooting. Well, I mean, if the first couple of shots weren't an execution, the last 55 or so definitely were when he was already on the ground and already dead. Or maybe close to death, and then they just pummeled him with bullets. Parker says, Anna and Cenk are more fired today than usual, tough news. Well, Parker, I definitely agree with tough news, that's for sure. Tanya Kremer says, Noem has also said she would not increase taxes to help programs to help mothers, but eliminated concealed carry fees in the state.
Yeah, she's a freaking monster, that's why.
That won't raise the taxes. We also have the 3rd highest rape rate. And so, by the way, every single fact that you just mentioned will be a positive for her when she tries to become Trump's VP. So, Republican voters are like, oh, you're not gonna help poor mothers and their kids might die? Yes. Oh, you're gonna let mass murderers carry around concealed weapons? Yes. Right? Oh, you don't actually care about women's lives or them being raped? A-okay. Keep going, Kristi. Oh, and by the way, you think I'm being mean to Kristi Noem or I'm exaggerating?
No, we're not being mean enough, please.
Show me a Republican voter in South Dakota that has objected to the fact that they're the 3rd in rapes in the country per capita. Not one. They don't care at all. Oh, she owned the libs. She owned the libs. Our state's a disaster, but we're owning the libs. Okay. Kate Bear 21. I live right around the corner from where Jayland Walker was executed. This is beyond disgusting. I'm terrified to let my children play outside because Akron Police Department are pure thugs.
Yeah, you should be. And by the way, even if you're living in a part of the country where you trust the cops and you don't think they're a threat, you should be scared when your kids are outside playing. There's mass shootings every single day in this country.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
And by the way, cops suck in both directions. One, they shoot the hell out of young black men no matter what the hell's going on. And then in places where there's a lot of crime and you need their help, they're not there.
They don't show up.
They just don't show up.
Yeah, there's an unofficial police strike happening. Let's just keep it real. That is absolutely what's going on in major metropolitan areas because their feelings got hurt over people protesting some of the extrajudicial killings that they carry out.
We read an LA Times article, we didn't cover it on the show, but a guy goes in front of a hair salon and starts masturbating in public.
Yep.
The cops don't show up for 40 minutes.
He was long gone by the time the cops showed up.
Yeah.
Broad daylight, by the way.
But he was there for a long, long time.
Yep.
Okay? And the cops don't show up because well, I don't want to deal with it. You still let the women inside deal with it, right? Classy, classy. Oh God, we wouldn't want to bother you at all. Anyway, Benjamin GL says, what sucks is that no doubt in my mind between ending Afghanistan, stopping drone war, $15 minimum wage for government employees, etc. Biden is probably the best liberals have to offer. I don't know about that, brother. I really don't know about that at all. I mean, yes, ending Afghanistan was good. Nah, he's definitely not doing enough. That is way too little.
I wish he was as motivated to help the American people as he was to help Ukrainians.
All right, back on TYT, Cheng and Anna with you guys. Also, John Atkinson, Shannon Selby, and Amber X. You guys are all amazing. Thank you for being Young Turks members. They hit the join button below, tyt.com/join. You could join them as well. We need you guys, so come help us. All right, Casper.
All right, well, let's give you a little update on an investigation taking place in Georgia in regard to the Trump campaign. A Fulton County, Georgia grand jury has been investigating whether or not there was criminal meddling into Georgia's 2020 elections as Trump and his allies were essentially encouraging election officials in the state to just find ballots that would help make all the difference for Donald Trump. Now, as a result of that investigation, they have just subpoenaed various Trump allies, including Rudy Giuliani, Senator Lindsey Graham, and John Eastman, Trump's lawyer, who had pushed this ridiculous, bogus political theory of implementing sham electors to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Now, other former Trump lawyers subpoenaed include Cleta Mitchell, Kenneth Chesebro, and Jenna Ellis. Now, the Fulton County DA, Fannie Willis, launched the criminal probe into Georgia's elections in February of 2021. Here's what we know so far. The investigation is focused on efforts by Trump and his allies to pressure Georgia election officials to decertify the election result and even find Trump votes so that he can win the state in the 2020 presidential election. In fact, there is already some significant evidence that is incriminating for Trump. In fact, he was caught on tape January 2nd of 2021, pressuring Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find him 11,780 votes so that he could win the state, a conversation that the Secretary of State later described as threatening. Now, here's why this is bad news for Trump and his cronies. Giuliani and Eastman have already testified in certain ways. Like Giuliani testified before Georgia legislators in late 2020, showing edited surveillance video of ballots being tabulated at Atlanta's State Farm Arena. The former New York City mayor said the tape was a powerful smoking gun of election workers pulling out suitcases of ballots to count after sending Republican poll watchers home. Again, that was an edited video and proved nothing. Eastman had also testified at the same Georgia hearing as Giuliani, during which he argued there was, quote, more than enough evidence of fraud and improper conduct to warrant Georgia lawmakers picking an alternative slate of presidential electors. So Cenk, I mean, look, there's already pretty incriminating evidence working against them, but they've now been subpoenaed by this grand jury. So we'll see how it plays out.
No, guys, this is actually super hopeful. Wait, why do I say that? I've been telling you all this time. There's no way the Democrats are gonna prosecute Donald Trump. They're way too weak. They're way too scared, way too complicit. They're not gonna do a goddamn thing, right? Oh, these aren't Democrats. These are Republicans. It's Republicans in Georgia that are looking to indict Trump. So they might actually get him. Now, look, that's a really damning indictment of the Democratic Party, that the Republicans are actually strong, and some of the time they will actually do the things that they say they're gonna do, and we all kind of know that, right? But since it's Republicans he pissed off in Georgia, and Republicans who are defying him in Georgia, and by the way, he just got killed in the Georgia elections. Everyone that he supported lost by like 40 points. So Georgia Republicans will be like, oh, you're coming for us. No, you made a mistake. We're not Democrats, we're Republicans. We'll come for you.
Yeah, it's actually kind of shocking and impressive that Georgia voters aren't insane.
No, it is. It's actually,
Like,
Georgia is an amazing case.
How did this happen?
I halfway know how it happened, but it is super interesting because every other state kisses Trump's ass like crazy,
No
the
matter
red
what.
states. And all their politicians are like, oh, Trump, I'll do anything. Please take my wife, right? And we show you the beta bus all the time with Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz driving, but you can see almost all of the Republican politicians there. But in Georgia, Ratzenberger and Kemp were like, no, we're not gonna break the law. No, you didn't win the election. We counted 3 times, we did a hand recount. No, you're lying, right? And then they go to vote, and Ratzenberger and Kemp win easily. And part of the reason was because Republican voters don't want Stacey Abrams to win. And they're worried that if they pick the lunatic that Trump wanted, that Stacey Abrams would win. So there's a little bit of realpolitik there, right? But even now, Herschel Walker, who did win, who was supported by Donald Trump, he's losing by 10 points. He lost his lead, and now he's way behind. Why? Because people saw he's a total moron. He spoke 2 sentences, and some Republicans in Georgia were like, no, I'm not voting for that idiot. I'll vote for Reverend Warnock from Martin Luther King's church instead. So Republicans in Georgia apparently are the only politicians with balls in the whole country.
And you know, it's incredible to see what the result is when you show courage and you don't let the bully you, right? Yeah. If you stand your ground and show strength in the face of pressure and intimidation tactics by Donald Trump and his cronies, that might actually really appeal to Republican voters.
Yeah, by the way, to be fair and accurate, the Democrats in Georgia are also strong. Stacey Abrams is super strong. Do you know that Rashad Ritchie used to run the Democratic Party in Georgia? Okay, he's the host of Indisputable now for the TYT Network. No, there's some real strength in Georgia, and it is, since we're used to the mushes and the cowards in the rest of the country in both parties, it's a bit shocking. So if you said to me, who's gonna hold Trump accountable? I would say your only shot is in Georgia. And so it's unbelievable, that's where we are today. But he better be worried, because they're not gonna stop, and they actually care to enforce the law there.
I mean, and they have subpoenaed Senator Lindsey Graham. Graham also separately called Raffensperger and his staff twice in the weeks following the November 2020 elections about re-examining certain absentee ballots cast in Georgia in order to explore the possibility of a more favorable outcome for Trump. And so that's a United States senator who decided to meddle in all of this in an effort to, yes, kiss up to Donald Trump, but why? Why did he kiss up to Donald Trump, even after all the negative things he said about Trump during the 2016 Republican primary? Because he wanted to be relevant, he wanted to stay relevant. He said as much during his interview with the New York Times podcast, The Daily, which I can't get over because he was just so candid about that. Well, now you're real relevant, especially when it comes to this investigation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, if they get indicted in Georgia, both Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump,
delicious.
That actually could be real trouble for them, because then they can't say, oh, deep state, Democrats, this is political. No, it's Republicans prosecuting you.
Yep.
And they're not scared. And that's the most important thing in the world. If it was a Democrat, he'd already be using depends. So, I mean, the Manhattan DA wet himself 17 times and then let Trump go. So that's Democrats for you.
Yep.
So damned if you do, damned if you don't, unless you live in Georgia.
We're gonna take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk about Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, and the gaggle of guys who love engaging in the oppression Olympics. They're the kings. We'll show you how.
Back on TYT. Let's go to Super Chat again. Lepton Soup 337 says, if those cops had a mag dumped on a fleeing unarmed combatant in a war zone, they'd be court-martialed for committing war crimes. So of course it's the SOP for cops. Defund the police, send a message. Look, I don't know about defunding the police. I think it's actually a bad slogan. First of all, I appreciate you writing in. I appreciate your generosity. But most importantly, I appreciate your experience. And you're right. Yes, this happens all the time. We've had veterans that are on the show here tell us, if we did anything like the cops do to our own citizens here in America, we'd be court-martialed. But in America, we've gotten used to nonstop massacres by criminals, by the cops, and our media tells us everything is normal. The cops massacring the citizens is normal. And so then everybody just goes back to business as usual. No, it's not normal, and even our own military knows it, and they don't even do it to combatants, let alone our own citizens. R. Stone wrote in, the Biden administration has given us first female VP, Juneteenth holiday, first black SCOTUS justice at the cost of reduced voting rights, medical privacy, and even more corporate takeover. Have we restored the soul of America yet? By the way, all of that is just optics, except for the Supreme Court justice, okay? So, yeah, you put a super corporate Democrat in as your first female black vice president. It's a nice historical note, but it's not a nice actual VP. I mean, the VP does nothing. She's useless. I can name you a dozen really strong African-American women who would have loved to roll up their sleeves and actually get something done.
Yep.
But that's why you wouldn't have picked them, because you don't want to do anything. You picked Kamala Harris because you knew that just like you, she would do absolutely nothing. On the other hand, Ketanji Brown Jackson, excellent justice. So credit where credit is due. Parker says, thanks for covering the Jalen Walker story. Found out when I saw Nina Turner doing a live stream with Akron Councilwoman Tara Mosley. Would recommend people see it. Remember Nina Turner, also from that general area. She's from Cleveland, but Akron's real close by and used to be part of that district. Now I'm gonna go to members. No, actually Twitch real quick. Speaking of Nina Turner's pet Dragon wrote in, that's her handle. So tired of hearing mental health while simultaneously not doing a damn thing about it. America is so freaking mental, but hey, here's a gun.
Totally.
That Yank Ryan wrote in, taking Bezos's profits and telling him to shove it in a constructive way by giving it to you all. Cenk looking fresh today. I only call him out specifically because Casper is fire every day. Okay, appreciate it. And here are some folks. Someone from Flimp gifted 2 subs, just here for the free drinks, gifted 5 subs. Look at Brett Ehrlich resubbing. We appreciate that, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
And now I'm gonna go to members. Louis Cipher wrote in, you know how you can tell if a shooter is white? Quote, taken into custody without incident.
Yeah, for real.
Totally. Post-traumatic South disorder said, hey, where's the NRA? He had a gun in his car. The NRA says he should have a dozen guns in his car. That's the Second Amendment. Oh wait, he's not white, never mind. Exactly, the NRA, no comment on this, Philando Castile or anyone else. back on TYT. Cenk, Anna, John Dokuk, David Coe, and Freakazoid 206. They just all hit the join button below on YouTube. We appreciate it. You could do likewise. It makes a giant difference. And for all of you that are not on YouTube, or if you're still on YouTube, you could do this as well. Gets you directly to our site and get all of our programming, and you help. tyt.com/join. Okay, Casper.
Well, let's talk about the people who are really oppressed in America, because it's not individuals dying of poverty. It's actually mansion dwellers who are really upset that there were consequences after breaking terms of service rules for social media platforms. Let's discuss. While women have had their reproductive rights stripped away from them, with the federal government essentially stepping in, or I should say state governments stepping in and telling them what they can and can't do with their bodies, Jordan Peterson will have you know that the real victims in this country are people like him, people like Dave Rubin, people like Ben Shapiro, and other mansion dwellers who found out the hard way, I guess, that there might be some consequences on social media platforms if you violate their terms of service, which are very clear and stated on the platforms. Now, Jordan Peterson is still crying about being suspended from Twitter after he decided to go after an actor who identifies as transgender. We covered this, but it's continuing. So here's some context before we go to Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. Last week, Jordan Peterson was suspended for tweeting this. Remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page just had her breast removed by a criminal physician? So what he did there was more of the same, okay? Going after the transgender community, in this case, dead naming Elliot Page, who identifies as male, and makes a weird comment about breast removal, which makes him even more creepy than I previously thought. Now, he was notified about why the suspension happened, and the terms of service specifically said, you may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, yada, yada. You guys get the point. But Jordan Peterson, like other right wingers, love to intentionally violate the terms of service, so they get suspended and then they become martyrs. Then they become part of this never-ending oppression Olympics, even as normal people are actually being oppressed by our politicians as we speak. So, by the way, Babylon Bee also got suspended for similar commentary on Twitter. And Jordan Peterson has really taken a stand here, okay? He released a video on YouTube in which he compared any kind of gender-affirming surgery to Nazi experimentation. So why don't we take a quick look at that?
With regard to the final phrase, criminal physician, I must say that I've had some post-coital, so to speak, regrets about that phrase. It is clearly the case that the surgical operation performed by the butchers who butchered Elliot/Ellen was legal. So, was it criminal or not? Were the operations undertaken by the fascist physicians who carried out the Nazi medical experiments legal? Yes, under the laws of the time. But were they criminal? I'll leave that question up to you to answer.
This is like at a time when we're seeing never-ending mass shootings in this country perpetrated by young men. I think it's problematic that that guy is the advice guru, the lifestyle guru. That guy is unhinged and should not be giving anyone advice. But anyway, no, there was no criminal activity in the gender-affirming surgery that was performed on Elliot Page. Criminality would indicate that laws were broken. A person who did that surgery would be prosecuted for that. There is no prosecution because there was no criminality. We have more from this lunatic, but before we get to it.
So there's a twist here in a second. But first, he looks like, I haven't watched that Man in a High Castle, but it feels like that kind of vibe from the commercials, right? Like he looks like an evil guy, and he sounds so weird. And why did you shoot it from the side? Are you trying to be artistic? I thought this was like an emotional plea.
It's just creepy.
Like everything about this guy is like on a scale of 1 to 10 on creepy, it's 20.
What was his comment about post-coital? Like,
yeah, what was
no one buys that you're post-coital anything.
But it didn't have any logical connection to anything else he was saying. He just wanted to say post-coital, partly because he knows that his followers don't understand it. So they'll be like, ooh, he's an intellectual. Every time I see Jordan Peterson, I laugh. Every time I hear him speak, because they think he's an intellectual. That just endlessly amuses me, okay? So now, can
the hot jocks please stop hoarding all the hot women? It's really unfair to all the unattractive loser men who aren't getting laid. That's Jordan Peterson.
That was an intellectual argument he had. Okay, anyways, so now the twist for me is I think Twitter's policy is wrong. So not on the harassment and the et cetera, which is what what Anna read you, but there is something very specific in there in their application. So if they dead name someone who is transitioned, they're automatically suspended. I don't agree with that rule. Now, do I think that you should dead name people? No. I think that the whole world is picking out trans people, or at least the country is, and pretending it's the most important issue. No, it's not the most important issue, and you shouldn't pick on them. I don't know what's wrong with all of you people. And by the way, the real victims are not the ones who live in the mansions, as Anna pointed out, but there's been over 600 laws passed against the LGBTQ community just over the last couple of years, all by Republicans. So no, there are real victims. They are trans, and they are in the LGBTQ community overall, and they're actually legally trying to oppress them and take away their rights. That being said, I don't think that it should be suspension just to say the dead name. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's hard to avoid. You know, when you're talking about, for example, Caitlyn Jenner, when she was in the Olympics, what are you supposed to call her? So I think that's a legitimate, interesting question, and I don't think that is worthy of a suspension. I think
there are well-intentioned people who are doing their best, and we got to be understanding, right? Not everyone is, deeply engaged in these topics, in these issues. They might not be as informed as we would like them to be, whatever it is. And so they might unwittingly tweet something that is offensive. They might accidentally dead name someone. And yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that it is an interesting, nuanced conversation. But at the same time, I do want to differentiate that from what is very much intentionally happening with people like Jordan Peterson, who this is his bread and butter. This is how his entire career started. Let's just be real about that, right? Making himself the martyr, making himself the one who's wronged, making himself the one who's somehow oppressed, even though he's raking in millions, giving guru speeches across the country, if not the world. Homeboy's good, okay? He is not some sort of oppressed victim. He has turned this into his grift, and it's been very profitable for him. So what they do, and see, Steven Crowder does it, all these right-wing grifters do it. They intentionally violate the terms of service for an online platform that is not owned by the government, that is a private company or a publicly traded company, which means that the constitutional rights that are, that protect our free speech do not apply to this business, right? But they know that and they don't care. They still make themselves out to be the oppressed ones. I've never seen Jordan Peterson or any other right winger who's constantly crying about being suspended from Twitter after very much intentionally violating their TOS, say anything about the anti-BDS legislation that literally allows the government to punish people who engage in the boycott and divestment movement for the Israeli government. They have no problem with that, even though, in my opinion, the government punishing you for your political speech is a violation of the First Amendment. They don't care about that. They're the real victims here. They're the real oppressed ones. You have another idiot like Dave Rubin jumping in on the grift. We'll get to him in a second. But first I want to go to the next video, because here's Jordan Peterson saying he would rather die than delete the tweet that got him suspended. Let's watch.
In response to the decision of an actor named Ellen Elliott Page, I am employing this awkward and impossible naming style because it is now apparently mandatory, and am probably doing it wrong nonetheless, as you're doing it wrong is the whole point of what has been made mandatory. But also, I'm trying to make a point. I've essentially been banned from Twitter as a consequence. I say banned, although technically I have been suspended. But the suspension will not be lifted unless I delete the hateful tweet in question, and I would rather die than do that.
A 10-year-old girl was just impregnated by her rapist in Ohio. 10-year-old girl, she's pregnant. She had to travel out of state to Indiana to get an abortion because her state of Ohio has effectively banned all abortions after 6 weeks. That 10-year-old who was carrying a rapist child and was further victimized by the state, that's someone who's being oppressed. Jordan Peterson, I mean, he could barely even act, like he's acting throughout that video. What a clown. You are not a victim, you are not oppressed. Intentionally violating the terms of service for Twitter and then getting suspended as a result does not make you a martyr, it doesn't make you a victim, it makes you a massive, pathetic grifter. How much money is enough? I wanna know. How much money is enough? And by the way, with all that money, you would think that this man would have, I don't know, the common sense to buy a suit that's not ill-fitting. But no, can't be bothered with that either. He's gotta look like a clown, both physically and sound like a clown every time he speaks.
Yeah, so they would never wanna be actual victims. I mean, that 10-year-old was raped. And then forget the 9 months that the Republicans and right-wingers want her to carry the baby, don't. But we take that out of the equation when you're talking about Jordan Peterson. Imagine if he suffered something like that, and then they said, oh, by the way, you're the guy who raped you, this is a random kid of his, you have to take care of that kid for the rest of your life. Imagine how Jordan Peterson would react. He'd be like, what is this? Like, no, nobody actually wants to be a victim. Being a victim sucks, it's terrible. You guys only like it because you're fake victims. It doesn't actually hurt you at all. And you say things like, oh, my First Amendment rights, because you know your followers aren't bright enough to understand the First Amendment. So here, but I have an easy solution to all of this. Peterson said, I'm not taking down that tweet or acknowledging that my tweet violated Twitter rules. Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who. Twitter's a rat hole in the final analysis.
Great, log off.
Right, that's it.
Log off, Grandpa.
No, but that's
log off.
No, we've already accomplished the mission. For the first time, we agree with Jordan Peterson, and not in his analysis of Twitter, but in that Twitter suspended you. You don't want to be on Twitter. Everybody's a winner.
Great.
Okay, great. Then why are you still crying?
Because it's his bread and butter. That's how he makes his money. Dave Rubin also got banned after he tweeted in defense of Jordan Peterson. The insanity continues at Twitter. Jordan Peterson has been suspended for his tweet about Ellen Page, again, dead naming Elliot Page. He just told me he will never delete that tweet. And then they always go cry to their, like little tattletales crying to their little daddy, Elon Musk, who can't do a damn thing because he hasn't purchased Twitter. And it's very likely he will renege on that deal. So paging Elon Musk, please daddy, please come to our defense. Anyway, he got suspended for that tweet, which, again, it's a violation of their terms of service. He knows it, but they love it. They love it every time they get suspended or banned. It's a perfect way to continue that grift.
Yeah, imagine if I told you guys, oh, Trump's platform, Truth Social. I went on there and then they banned me. I'm the victim. They're terrible. Truth Social is the worst site I've ever seen. I can't believe they won't let me on it. You'd be like, wait, Jake, that doesn't make any sense. You just said it was the worst site. Why are you complaining that they won't let you on it, right? But for the right wing, they all find it totally normal. They're like, oh, yeah. We hate that thing, but we gotta be on it, because otherwise, how can we yell at liberals and progressives and do the only thing that we care about, which is hating and oppressing other people? All right, guys, in the bonus episode for the members, 2 hilarious stories. You're gonna love them. TYT.com/join. Or if you're on YouTube, just hit that join button below the video. We'll see you there.
Indisputable has